Well, she may not know Adam's secret, but she has a secret of her own. Here's a look at the brand new Mondo Master Universe Teela 1/6 scale figure, Mondo exclusive. If your Master Universe are going to have any chance against the expanding evil horde, they're going to need a little help from the Captain of the Royal Palace Guard. So without further ado, the next figure in the Master Universe 1/6 scale line is none other than the warrior goddess Teela. The Teela 1/6 scale figure timed edition comes complete with faux fur elements plus an array of weaponry and portraits, including one inspired by Mattel's 2000X line. And of course, they had to include an epic serpent headdress worthy of the mystic guardian of Grayskull. While Teela may do a good job guarding palaces, she does a poor job of spotting terrible disguises. Just before, of course, we get a closer look at the new Mondo Master Universe Teela, first I'd like to thank the folks over at Mondo that provided the sample we could have a look at. Sad to say, though, Teela sold out fast over on their sites. At least they do have the option of the Notify Me When Restocked. If you select that, they can contact you when they restock the member of the Royal Guard. Teela is, though, going to stand, if you technically count the little bun that she has on top of her head, about 11¼ inches in height, or the figure's going to stand about 28½ centimeters tall. Yeah, terrible, terrible. He-Man's nothing really more than Prince Adam with a tan. From a size standpoint, if you're comparing the way they look in the cartoon, Teela is normally just a little bit shorter than He-Man, and I think Mondo's captured the size appropriately here. If you were to, say, compare with another female figure, here's what she looks like with He-Man's twin sister, She-Ra. She's also a little bit shorter than her as well. How about we start things first with Teela's display stand? First, I just want to say, I'm glad that Mondo's gone this direction when it comes to their display stands, going the much larger footprint oval-shaped stand rather than what they were doing before with the M-shaped stands. The stands were finding good for taking up less real estate space, but if you really wanted to occupy the most quarters with them, the feet were, especially if you wanted to have them a wider stance, the oval-shaped stand makes better sense. The top of the train, as you can see, it looks very somewhat similar to maybe the inside of the Palace or even Castle Grayskull, although instead of green, it's here in black. Of course, you got yourself the adjustable neck that's going to plug in place. This was a separate piece. All it is, just a case, is it plugs into the slot right here. And then you're going to get this bracket. So this is basically this waist clip bracket that's going to fit inside here. I've had problems in the past. Luckily, I didn't have any problems here with Teela. When sometimes you're putting them in like this, it tends to split the plastic because essentially this is a front and back piece that are molded together or glued together. Sometimes even just the force of this can result in these splitting in half. Luckily, it didn't end up being the case here. Now, also, when you're putting this around Teela's waist, the one thing you really want to be careful of, even though they really have added rubberized feet on the ends of it, because there is a lot of white paint happening here. Luckily, knock on wood, it hasn't happened yet. There's certainly a potential, though, that could scrape some of the paint. So, of course, when you are putting it around her waist, first of all, you want to make sure it's high enough. Just bring it up just a little bit, clamp it around her waist, but you want to really make sure that when you are putting it around her waist, you're separating the prongs first before you fit it around. Never really want to force it or have the friction rub against it, because, of course, there's always the potential that the paint may flake off. Let's walk through the accessories that come included with the timed edition of Teela. Now, because this is the timed edition, Teela is going to come included with 3 alternate head portraits as well as the serpent headdress. I'm glad, first of all, that they included the headdress. If you are familiar with the original vintage toy, then you would recognize this being the way that Teela looks when she comes out of the packaging. This has been done with using a very soft plastic, and I'm glad that they used soft plastic. The nature of this has to be that it has to fit over top of her head. You're not opening this up in any way, nor are you removing a faceplate from her face. You're literally just taking the head and you're fitting inside the open mouth of the serpent. The serpent's been painted well, as you can see. The eyes nicely done here in a green. There's a little bit of reflection added in there as well. They've panel lined some additional yellow also in there as well, and even finished the back of it, so it looks just as good as it does from the front. Now, if you're going to take one of Teela's heads, you may not necessarily want to use the one from the 2000X series, just because, again, she's got the bangs on either side. But if you want to use more the classic head sculpt, then she comes with 2 versions of this, kind of a neutral expression, and then she also has one that has more of a, I don't want to say sinister, but you definitely see there's a lot more going on behind the scenes when it comes to what she's thinking about. She's just looking to get a hold of one of Skeletor's cronies. But if you want to take this head, for example, you're going to take the headdress and kind of take the head and you want to point the chin up on an angle. Just because if you don't, you're going to be running this against, and all of this is all friction. Of course, the way they've meticulously painted the heads, the last thing you really want to do is cause damage to that. So you just want to kind of take the chin and tip it up like this, and then just tuck it inside the headdress. If everything lines up the way that you want it to, then this is what Teela's head would look like. Now, of course, you couldn't do all this really with having the head already attached to the body, especially with the amount of fighting I had to do to change out the heads, and you'll see what I mean in a second. It's probably the best idea first to put the head on that you want to use before putting the headdress on. The headdress, honestly, is the easiest thing you want to do to swapping out the head, because obviously doing it the way that we're doing it right now, you're going to have a bigger struggle. So she comes included with that. And again, like if you wanted to, you could change this head sculpt with the one that we start things with first. I'm going to go back to this as when we look at the head sculpt for the one that she has right now. The figure, speaking of vintage things, comes included with her vintage shield. The shield has been cast in a brown plastic, although the inside of it, as you can see, they've gone in and painted a nice additional yellowish gold. The handle is there, of course, for her to hold this. It's a fairly small shield, but to be fair, really, the old vintage toy also had a generally small shield. She really wasn't blocking much of anything. I do like the gold accents that they've added in there as well. You can see very meticulously they've added a scroll work embedded into the plastic. That's a fine-looking shield. A fine-looking shield. The figure also comes included with a spear. Now, the spear has very much similar colors. If we look at the shield and then we look at the spear, very much the same kind of golds, very similar types of brown, although I would say maybe like the handle of the spear is probably maybe a little bit more of a darker brown, but it's very close to the handle that she has for the spear. This can fit into her hands. I will say, though, this as a cautionary tale, be careful when you are putting things into her hands. This has already happened for me, and I will tell you this. When I was first putting this into her hands, I just made the assumption, and this is the big mistake on my part, that the fingers and the thumb were attached together. So when I was putting like the serpent staff in her hand, for example, which as you can see is a very nice work done to the serpent head. Unfortunately, though, I end up scraping the paint, and the paint is only scraped down below here, and if anything, you could write it off that it looks just like it's a little bit more war-torn. Don't slide it into her hands, whatever you do. Instead, go the route of what I'm doing right now. If you look at actually the hands, for a second, you may think to yourself, well, wait, there's no way. You can see like the middle finger, for example, is attached to the thumb, but it's not. You can actually take the thumb. You can actually take the four fingers, I should say, and you can pry them away from the palm. Now, if you're also having a struggle to do this, you can also pre-prep this by heating the hands in hot water. Pry the hands, though, away from the palm, and I would say even then, I don't feel like it gives you nearly enough clearance. The hard thing about this, though, is when you are prying the hands like this, you want to really make sure that the hands are closed with a small enough grip that it's going to hold the staff once it's in their hands. The problem also goes with that, though, is that you also want to, if you're having it too tight like this, then she's going to have a problem where, like I already had this problem, it's going to start to scrape the paint off. So, like I said, just pry the fingers, please, whatever you do. Pry the fingers, though, away from the palm before you decide to put either the spear or the scepter in her hand, please. Let's go ahead and just remove this right now. We'll put it off to the side. Okay, so Teela also does come included with a sword, and the sword does also come included with a sheath. Now, the thing about it, though, is that the sheath is attached already to a belt. I looked initially at this, and I was thinking, oh, there must be a way. Surely there is a way that you can detach the belt and open this up, because if you're looking at the waist, and then you're trying to figure out for yourself, how am I going to get this on the figure's body? It is just really a lot of sliding. It's just a whole lot of praying. If you actually look, though, at the sheath, we can actually see you got a little eagle motif down below. That looks fantastic. Love the use of the darker gold that they've got here. And, of course, if you want to draw the blade out, you can see the blade has been painted well in silver. You got a little bit of a red accent there by the guard. And even like the hilt itself has very much somewhat of a similar design to the Sword of Power. Of course, this can fit into her hands as well, but the same cautionary tale. Just want to make sure you pry the finger. Okay, all right. I already covered off all that. I just want to, again, show you guys. That's a really nice looking hilt. Here's where the biggest problem comes when it comes to facing this figure. You got basically two things to contend with: removing and changing the heads, and also doing this. What you're going to want to do, and I was trying to think, there must be another way I can get this onto the figure's body, but there isn't. There really needed to be a detachment point right here where maybe one part of the plastic was overlapping another and maybe just tabbed in place. I don't know. Either way, though, what you end up having to do, though, is you literally you have to do what you think you have to do. You have to put the feet, legs together like this and then sort of shimmy them up. The crucial thing is obviously also making sure that you've got it facing the right way. You don't want to go up the journey of doing this and then realize halfway up or even all the way up that you put it on the wrong way. The only thing about this, though, is that she has this fur at the tops of her boots, and she also has these knee guards. You really do want to make sure that when you're doing this. Now, luckily, though, the strap is a soft enough plastic that there is give to it, but there isn't a lot of it. So again, you're just having to, I think once I decide on what I'm going to be doing with Teela, I think I'm just going to leave it the way it is. But all you're literally doing is, here's where I have this issue, is right around here, because I'm thinking to myself, that's going to start to rub the paint, or it's going to rub the paint off of this, and it's going to be even worse. You're going to have like a brown stain on the side of her leg. So you just, again, have to shimmy this up her leg. You're not going to be enjoying at all what you're doing right now. Again, we're just going to be sliding this up. And while I'm doing this, you may be thinking to yourself, come on, man, there's got to be an easier way to do this. And I would have loved to have been able to say, you know what, you're absolutely right, but there doesn't seem to be. It's just a case of just hoping, just fingers crossed the whole time, and just shimmy this up. Now, I've done this three times now. What you could also really do too, and I haven't yet done this, is maybe even heat the belt up just a little bit, because I think if you heat up the plastic, you might even find you might find you're having an easier time of getting that up onto her. And then, of course, you're going to have to get this around her backside as well. Just, come on. I really wish, again, that this was just an easier thing to do and didn't rely so much on pulling this over top of her body, because essentially that's what you're going to have to do. And once you get it, that's what it looks like. It's a shame, really, that it's so loose up here and so tight down here, because in order to get it from here, you're going to have to get it from the very bottom of her feet all the way up. But eventually, it does sheath on the side of her body. I wouldn't even be able to say either, too. I said earlier, like, if you heat the belt, maybe you could soften up the plastic just to stretch it a little bit more. But here, then, is the problem that you're going to be facing. Once that plastic is so soft, it might even just find it like kind of sliding down the side of her body. So, again, like putting that on her body, it's not the easiest thing. I really wish that Mondo found an easier method of doing things. Okay, so once that's in place, the other things that, of course, we can have a look at when it comes to Teela. Now, Teela does have, I've noticed, at least on mine, she has a little bit of looseness here on the knees and also the ankle articulation. We'll talk more about that also in a moment. The figure also does come with some swappable hands. So outside the norm of the gripping hands that she has right now, Teela does also come include with closed fists. And she also comes include with gestured hands. None of the following things I just finished talking about would be aiding you at all when it comes to holding your accessories. I suppose, if anything, maybe you could put the shield. Yeah, you could probably take the hand for the shield. You could do it that way. Gripping hands probably would be the better suitable hands for that. The last thing that we're going to have a look at for Teela is kind of where I feel a little bit of a divisive opinion. I'm not really sure what head sculpt I do really want to use. We've already looked at the fact that first of all, like, getting Teela out of the packaging, she does have more of a classic looking head. I mean, if you are a fan of the way that she looked in the original toy line, or even a big fan of the way she looked in the original Filmation cartoon, then this is the head sculpt that you're going to really want to go with. She has her hair up here in a bun. It's really nicely sculpted also here on the back as well. She, of course, does have her tiara done nicely here in gold. The gold matches well to the top of her bodice. Of course, all the additional armory that she has down below here on her body. It's just a very decoratively detailed figure. The face, as you can see, does have a little bit of eyeshadow there around there as well. She's got what looks to be also maybe some mascara. It's a really beautiful looking face. I think, if anything, again, like, of the two head sculpts, we'll bring this one back in right now. Unless you really like to have Teela in the middle of a battle, perhaps maybe even, in fact, use this head sculpt. But I actually kind of like either this one or the 2000X series. And I think, if anything, I probably would end up using this head sculpt, I feel, instead for the serpent headdress. Okay, so here's where my problem is kind of facing. Generally, though, I would have really wanted to put these figures on the shelf the way they look like they're classic figures. And yet, though, I love this head sculpt. This is pulled, of course, from the 2000X Master Universe cartoon, where Teela has not only a higher ponytail, but she also has bangs on the front of her face. It's too good of a head sculpt. I feel I really want to put it back in the packaging. So I feel, while normally I would have gone this route, now seeing the options available in front of me, I think I might go this route instead. Here comes, again, one of the second problems I'm going to have with this figure, and it has to do with really removing the heads and replacing the heads. The ball joints are really tight. Now, to take the head off, kind of just want to hold on to everything as well as you can, and you want to just pop it off the ball joint. Now, unlike the other two things I already talked about, where I said, man, I really should have heated this up, I did end up heating this up, and I still find putting the heads on is such a hard thing to do. So to get the new head in place, again, you just want to wiggle it back and forth. The thing I really don't want to do is put too much pressure onto the tiara, and because, again, she also has the bangs on the top of her head, but you want to wiggle this back and forth. I did already heat this up, but I feel like, again, I probably could have heated this up just a little bit more. So taking a little bit of my own advice, I paused for a second and just ran upstairs and reheated the head. I wanted to make sure that when I was putting it back onto the ball joint, the last thing I really wanted to do was put a lot of pressure on the top tiara or the back of the ponytail, for example. But once it's in place, you can get yourself now the 2000X. Now, if you're just joining us right now, I don't even know how that's even possible. Well, we started things first when it kind of came to Teela was getting her out of the packaging. She already started with the classic head sculpt. You're not wrong at all if you want to stick with this head sculpt when it comes to displaying her on the shelf. Or if you want to, you can also have her as well showcased with the anchor expression, which I think I will reserve, if anything, if I want to display her with the serpent headdress. Here's where I feel like generally when I've wanted to display these figures, the idea in mind is what I wanted to put them on the shelf, either looking like the original vintage toy or the way they looked in the Filmation cartoon. Teela might very well be the exception to that because she looks too good of a head sculpt with the 2000X design that might just end up keeping this head sculpt on her body for the rest of this remaining review and the way I'm going to be displaying her on the shelf. Now, the difference with this Teela is that she does have the bangs here on the front. She has a different style of tiara, so just again, bringing back in the original tiara. Yeah, very much a different sculpt. And this one also does have a long ponytail on the back. Now, I don't want to say this to you, and you guys say, well, this guy told me I could, but it does seem like the ponytail does rotate back and forth. Look at this only as just a recommendation. I wouldn't turn this too much. Even though it does look like it does rotate, I wouldn't also want to be shredding whatever's attaching the two together, where it would end up just tearing the ponytail right off. So, even though it does seem like it does want to move back and forth, just take that with a grain of salt. The design of Teela does look fantastic, though. Even if you decide you want to go with this head sculpt, I mean, the body works either way. Now they've also added the fur all around her collar. They've also added fur down below here on her boots. You will find this happening a lot. When you're changing out the heads, when you're moving anything really on the figure's body, from time to time, you'll find all these little fibers and hairs falling off. There was really no way really around it. I mean, even just moving the head alone, you might find just the occasional fibers falling off. I mean, even I got one right there, for example. I think it adds a little bit something to that. I mean, up to this point, the only other fur that we've had was also on the male figures with their loincloths. So it's really not that different, the idea that Teela would have had it as well. Love the gold that they've got here for the front of her bodice. Very, again, intricately sculpted. This is a separate piece, and once you kind of have put on the belt a couple of times, it ends up kind of just lifting this from the front of her body. Really nice gold and also additional bronze that they've added here for the gauntlets. She's also got some really nice attentions to detail that you don't end up seeing until you start flipping the figure around, like all the little stitch lines that she has on the back of her bodice. Really, really nice sculpted figure. The only thing I would really say from a standpoint of getting this figure on the shelf is if you decide you want to put on, for example, the belt, you're going to struggle with that. I mean, there's really no ways around it. And unless you preheat these heads, even just take a few passes with a hairdryer, changing out the heads is going to be an issue for you. For the figure's articulation, going back to the head, of course, the head's going to be on a ball joint. So for all intents and purposes, if you had the classic head, it would be able to rotate all the way around. Because now you're dealing with a ponytail, it is going to get in the way of things, but you can still freely move the head back and forth, up, down, and you can also rock it back this way as well. The arms of Teela are a little on the tighter side, at least for mine. I've moved this a couple of times, and it still wants to give me troubles. What I would normally say come at a 45-degree angle, and it also does rotate all the way around. The figure doesn't have any swivel in the bicep, but what she does have at least is a swivel in the elbow, which also serves as a hinge as well. Loose hands may be part of the territory you get when it comes to Teela. She is a little loose in the wrists, at least on mine. She's loose on the knees, and she's also loose on the ankles. So just going to give that a heads up for that. Upper torso is going to be on a ball joint once again. The legs are on split. You can see there's ball joints working behind the scenes. The legs go forward, the legs go back. There's a swivel there at the top of the thigh. Again, you've got double hinges on the knees. It's one of those instances where like the lower knee is a little loose. So you can see there's a little bit of rock happening there, but it's excessively tight here on the top. So while you struggle maybe with the top of the knee actually bending, you'll find that the bottom of the knee kind of gives you a little bit of looseness in the legs. She does have an ankle pivot back and forth. She has an ankle rocker up and down as well. But, again, with unfortunately this one, it is a little loose. So I don't know if necessarily that's going to be with everybody's copy, but can only really speak for the copy that I have in front of me. All in all, though, Teela, fantastic looking figure. Let's just move all these accessories out of the way here. There's a lot of options also available as well, which kind of, again, goes to the territory with what we generally get with Mondo. It isn't just always the case that you get the standalone character. No, I mean, like, even if you look at, like, He-Man, if you're lucky enough to get your hands on, like, the timed editions or the exclusives, for example, I just happen to have He-Man over here. as I was grabbing He-Man, his arm fell off, but just popping that back in place. As I was, though, saying, the one thing about Mondo is they always throw in all these extra Easter eggs. It's never, ever just the case that you're only going to be getting the standalone character as they look. You're going to either be getting nods to the original 80s toy line, or you're going to be getting the stuff from the Filmation cartoon. Teela, though, unlike, say, She-Ra or unlike He-Man, does also throw in there as well the 2000X head sculpt, which might be the one time this time where I'm actually almost considering the idea of displaying her looking like this and not necessarily displaying her looking like this. The options are certainly available, whether you want to use like the weapons that she wields in the original toys, or again, if you want to have the character displayed with the serpent headdress. So the only thing about that, though, is I would also say, just again, be careful, because I've scraped the paint off the bottom of this. Even though you can pry the fingers and open up the grip, as you're doing this, you can even feel like there's resistance as you're sliding this into her hands. So you just want to, again, be careful, because that will scrape the paint off quite easily. But there's a lot of good stuff going on here for Teela. I can certainly see why the figure sold out as quickly as it did. We can only, again, hope that Mondo is going to be restocking this figure for those that didn't get the chance to grab her the first time. If you are a fan of the Master Universe and you love the stuff that Mondo's been doing with this line, Teela, I feel, is a must-have pickup. While apparently they can't trust Teela with secrets, there's no secret at all that Teela is one of the best offerings we've gotten so far from Mondo under their Masters of the Universe banner. I mean, it doesn't come without some problems, one of the biggest ones really being attaching her belt. I wish, though, it was just more of a simpler case of detaching the belt, at least from maybe the back of it, where you'd never even be able to see it. But it has to be literally a case where you have to slide it up her boot and up her thigh. And then with that, there's the risk that it's going to rub some of the paint off. Either the paint off the belt, or if even worse, the paint off her legs. The figure swapping out the head can also be a bit of an issue, but that's an easier problem I feel to solve. If you having a struggle, just do what I did. Heat the head up with either a hairdryer or hot water, just to soften up that socket so the heads are going to be easier to swap. The figure does have all the included accessories I feel a figure like this should have. Now, in the past, when we have gotten Mondo releases, what they tend to usually do is throw in little Easter eggs to the cartoon. It may include characters, for example, like She-Ra came included with Cowl. Teela doesn't have anything like that necessarily. I think maybe if anything, they could have included maybe the sorceress transformed into an eagle, but let's really be fair. I mean, honestly, Teela has enough things going for her anyways. She has the serpent headdress, she has all the things that go with that, and a whole slew of accessories. Maybe not necessarily is the case that she needs an accessory or a nod to the original Filmation cartoon. Like I did say earlier, though, unfortunately, Teela has sold out. You can always go the option of either going to the aftermarket of trying to track one down right now, but Teela's going for a pretty hefty price. Or you can also go to Mondo's site directly and go in the option of notify me when she's restocked. If there's a likelihood that she is going to get restocked, I'm sure seeing the success of how well she's sold, there's a good likelihood, I'm sure, that Mondo's going to want to re-release her again. And if that's the case, you definitely will want to be grabbing this one and adding it to your collection. Big thank you once again to the folks over at Mondo that were kind enough to provide this sample of the brand new Master Universe Teela that we had the chance to have a look at this review. Let me know what you guys think of this figure down below in the comments section. And if you had the choice between the three head sculpts, which one would you choose if you wanted to have Teela on your shelf? If in the meantime you guys also did enjoy this video, do it a solid. Why don't you throw it a like? You guys want to stick around for more so? I hope so. Hit the subscribe, turn on that bell, and of course the biggest thing is that you're coming back regularly. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.